I don't have a lot of time. My wife's looking for me. You may recognize me. I am the man in the field. What? You never heard of me? Well, they say I'm in here. You have these here, right? This is a church. You read these? Well, I can't read. And because I can't read, I don't know how the story ends. And it nags at me. I want to know what happened to him. I keep wondering, if I had not been here that day in the field and told him where to go, would history have been different? Hey, you want me to show you how it all went down?
I can hear you. Don't tell me you're standing out in that field bothering those folks again.
Speaking of things that nag at me, I just talking to some nice church people, that's all.
Well, just don't bore them by reenacting that old story of yours.
They're Lutherans. They're used to being bored. Let me set the scene. This is Shechem, and this is a big field where shepherds come to graze their sheep. Well, I was just minding my own business that day, just standing here when they came, the two brothers. Now, I knew of the family and that this could be a dangerous place for them. So I wasn't too surprised when one of the brothers says, "Let's take the flock to Dothan." And then off they went. Well, who shows up a little while later but a young man wearing a very colorful tunic? Well, I watch as he's wandering around like he's looking for something or somebody. So finally I walk up to him and I ask him, "Who are you looking for?" Well, he says to me, "My father Jacob has sent me here to find out where my brothers are grazing the sheep. Do I have any idea where they are?" Well, I said to him, "Pretty good idea. They've gone to Dothan." And then before I know it, before I can find out who he is and what's going on, he takes off straight for that faithful city. I never saw him again. Makes you crazy, doesn't it? Wondering what happened? God, I'd love to know.
Well, let me tell you.
God? I didn't know you were really listening.
Well, I'm not exactly God. I'm the pastor of this church. Would you like to hear the story?
Oh, yeah.
The story of Joseph. A tale of audacious dreams and vindictive jealousies, cunning deceptions and undeserved forgiveness, the fear of death and the joy of life, the intention of evil and the graciousness of good. Scholars have found parallels to parts of the saga in ancient Egyptian folklore. As with any age, archetypal characters and meta-stories rich with meaning are appropriated by various cultures and claimed as their own. Yet the Joseph narrative has a unique place in our Holy Scriptures. On the one hand, it advances the story of the Israelites' chosenness, proclaimed first through Abraham, then passed on through Isaac and Jacob, and now Joseph. Further, considering Joseph through a Christian lens leads some to see his unjust treatment, his travails, and its triumphs as prefiguring Christ. These are connections to contemplate and consider, to be sure. But I would suggest the Joseph saga draws us in, for as we read the story, we read about ourselves. We too know about crises and tensions and the quest for resolution and renewal. We too, when we look, can find God mysteriously, inscrutably, unmistakably present. Joseph's stories and our stories reveal God in action. By the time that man overheard Joseph's older brothers, the backstory was already complex. Jacob has fathered 12 sons, but only 2 of them are by his first love, Rachel, that he waited 14 years to marry. Joseph and baby Benjamin, with whom Rachel died during childbirth. Now, you don't need to go beyond Parenting 101 to know that you shouldn't treat your children differently. But Jacob apparently has missed this lecture. Young Joseph, 17 and handsome, is Jacob's favorite. Joseph knows it, and his brothers know it. Joseph dresses differently. He acts differently. Whereas his brothers are sheep herders and outdoorsmen, Joseph is a dreamer. He isn't destined for working in the fields. He's being groomed for management, oversight, greatness, even as a young man. He gets to go out and observe his brothers and report back on their behavior without getting his own fingernails dirty. Well, Joseph has a dream that all his brother sheaves all bow down to his, and he has the audacity to tell his siblings. The self-evident now becomes the prophetic. The brothers are annoyed. We didn't read it this morning, but there's another dream, even more lofty than the first, in which the sun, the moon, and 11 stars all bow down to Joseph, that imply his parents must obey him as well. The brothers think, just who does this guy think he is? But Jacob keeps the matter in mind, for he knows that Joseph is different because he's Rachel's boy. He's special. Now, while there might not be a good excuse for the brothers' lust for vengeance, there's certainly a good explanation. To them, Joseph is a tattletale and a threat to their own destiny and fortune. Maybe Joseph is just a show-off, but those dreams, they can be divine omens. Who knows what trajectory lies ahead? The brothers determine that their only shot at great stature and their father's attention is to eliminate the impediment, which would be Joseph. Suspense builds. Jacob sends the brothers to graze the sheep in Shechem. They go. Next, Jacob sends Joseph on a reconnaissance mission to check on the brothers. He arrives in Shechem, but his siblings aren't there. Only that man wandering in the field. He's an anonymous character, but he advances the story by unwittingly sending Joseph to a seeming demise. The brothers are not in Shechem. The man says, I heard him say, they're going to Dothan. Joseph sets off to find his siblings, but they see him first at a distance, and merely the sight of him is more than they can sustain. Let's kill him becomes the rallying cry. One of the brothers is conflicted. Reuben suggests throwing Joseph in a pit, figuring later he will secretly retrieve his dreamer brother. Reuben wants no blood on their hands, but alas, Reuben isn't around when Judah figures out how to have the cake and eat it as well. They can get rid of Joseph without laying a hand on him by selling him as a slave to some Ishmaelites bound for Egypt. So a brother's life is sold for 20 pieces of silver. All that's left to do is wipe Joseph off the map in dear old Dad's eyes. Dipping Joseph's fancy robe in blood and calling it a tragic encounter with a wild animal, that'll do the trick. So even though blood is not on the brothers' hands, deception is in their hearts. Jacob is bereft and mourns his son for many days. Joseph, meanwhile, arrives in Egypt. He's sold to Potiphar, the captain of the guard.
Whoa.
In the Pharaoh's court.
Where are you going? We want to know what happens next.
Patience, my good man. You'll have to return next week to learn how the story unfolds. But even in this opening act, like all great literature, the story imparts universal truths. We see how a parent's favoritism can wreak havoc in a family, pitting one sibling against another. Because while the brothers are the ones that commit the heinous crime, make no mistake, Jacob bears some responsibility. Because Jacob is partial to his fair-haired son Joseph, and he takes no pains to hide it. He breeds rivalry rather than brotherly love. We also see how succumbing to our jealousies can distort our sense of right and wrong and lead us to diminish our own integrity. Because you see, the brothers, they knew they were doing wrong, but their rage led them to commit to crime that they would later regret. Rather than find fulfillment in what they had, they became fixated on what they had not. But did you notice one other puzzling thing? Here we are in a Bible story, and yet so far, there hasn't been a mention of the name of the Lord. As Joseph's saga begins, we can't help but wonder, where is God in the midst of all of this brokenness and deceit? Which then leads us to wonder, where is God in ours? Where is God in our stories, with our own brokenness and deceit, our own heartaches and hurts? Could Joseph's saga be merely a story of survival of the fittest? Well, stay with me as the narrative unfolds. For one thing, God's name is indeed referenced later, but perhaps more poignant will be the recognition that God's silence is not the same thing as God's absence. We may not hear God's voice or hear the name invoked. We may not see God's hand at first in the crises and the unresolved issues of our lives, but make no mistake, mysteriously, reassuringly, even artfully, God is there. For even when life seems unfair or heading towards a dead end, for Joseph and for us, there is a way forward. There are men in the field. There are possibilities. There are new ideas. There are people that God places in our paths. There are opportunities to continue our stories, even find new life. In fact, there is always and eternally a to be continued, even when it seems like the last period has been placed. So let us learn. Let us learn from Joseph. Let us learn his story and how God is with him and how God is with each of us. Amen.